Rolling, rolling, rolling.
Am I good to not do the backup?
No, you always have to do the backup. We haven't even figured out how to delete this stuff off here, so...
You heard that?
Yeah. You always have to do it.
Okay. Of course.
I've told you that like 4 times.
It's one of my languages.
Hi, this is Cristina Dam, and this is Liberate the Podcast, where we educate, motivate, inspire, and liberate your consciousness. From spirituality, holistic healing, to creativity and conscious business, we've got your mind, body, and spirit covered. Hi, welcome to another episode of Liberate the Podcast. I'm excited because we get to have one of our own facilitators of many different things, from different forms of plant medicine to facilitating change and inspiration in people. She's here at least twice a month with us on a regular basis, and when we can snag her a little bit more, we like to. And I've had some just huge transformational work happen for myself personally, working with this wonderful woman, Celeste, on my right here. So, hi, Celeste. Hi. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh, where to begin?
I like it to be vague at first, and then I like to see where you go, and then we can drill into different things.
Yeah. It's just funny because a lot of times people will ask me, how did you get started in all of this? And I'm like, I don't know. Because, hindsight is 20/20. So when I start to look back at my life, I can see so early on, like from my earliest memories, the seeds start to be planted for my path,
Yeah. I love that. That might be something that we get into talking about because, based on the last, I had the privilege of joining Celeste in the last Cacao ceremony that she did here. And, and seeing all of those elements of the past come together. And so we'll put a pin in that. But I want to hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So basically, I started really diving into my healing journey and finding ways that I could be of service to other people and sharing my healing work about 10 years ago now.
Okay.
I started off creating healing sanctuaries at transformational festivals.
Nice.
Yeah. So one of my exes, one of my best friends, he's one of the biggest festival producers in the country. So Burning Man style festivals out in the forest or the desert. And what I always loved most about that kind of event, I can't even call it an event, it feels like such a minimal, about that experience, is that it's just a completely paradigm shifting thing, to see people out in nature, first of all, partying, but also having this experience of community and of humanity and having this arena to really grow and evolve and expand their consciousness. So seeing the different healing arts that were available to people at these kind of events, it was really inspirational for me. And honestly, the first couple of years, I would go to these festivals and I was just like jaw on the floor, because my brain is just like, what is this? This is like an amazing experimental utopian society, this like underground culture that's slowly emerging,
Yeah. And emerging it is in a big way.
Right,
you see more and more festivals. Burning Man's getting bigger and bigger to the point where, and it's popping up all over because I think that people are searching for that connection again.
Exactly. The word connection is exactly what comes to mind.
And so you're being exposed to all of these different forms of festivals, your jaws drop to the ground and you're having these experiences. Were you somewhat on a spiritual path before then? I mean, we're always
right, sure.
to a certain extent, but I mean, were you diving in and kind of fascinated with trying to seek out more information or discovery before that?
Yeah, I would say that I started to become aware of my spiritual path and journey probably when I was around 17 or 18 when I moved to Norway. I grew up in California, but I moved to Norway. And
What brought you to Norway? Sorry.
I was going to mention it, but I was like, keep the tangents to a minimum.
No, that's you get it. I'll just ask random things.
Yeah,
but I mean,
perfect,
they're probably like, how would you,
Sure.
especially it's an interesting factoid. Only 5% of the United States population goes beyond the borders of the United States besides Canada and Mexico.
How, 5% you said?
Less than 5%.
Wow.
Of the American population travels beyond the borders of Mexico and Canada.
That's wild.
So, we're talking about, okay, so you're finding yourself not only going and traveling abroad, but you're actually going and living there. So what brought you there?
Yeah, I was dating a guy in high school, and he was half Norwegian, and I had a pretty tumultuous upbringing.
Okay.
Did a lot of raising myself, and as soon as I graduated high school, I was like, I'm out of here. Let's go. I'm also half German, so I have dual citizenship. So it made it really easy for me to go and live in a completely different place,
Yeah.
And while I was over there...
Were you born here, though?
I was born in Germany.
You were born in Germany?
Yeah, born in Germany. Grew up in Northern California, so I'm only technically German. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom was born in Germany, so I've always been wanting to get my citizenship over there because she's a citizen.
Yeah, it's
dual citizenship.
handy.
Yeah.
Super handy.
So you go over there, and how much time did you spend over there?
I lived there for a year.
A year?
Yeah, it was amazing. So magical. And just every time that I travel, it feels so transformative, It's like my mind is so hungry for that kind of stretching, I recently went back to Germany, actually, in October. I was in Berlin for 3 weeks, and I was just reminded once again of how profound it is to be walking down the street, and you have to figure out how to push the button to cross the street, right? That's presence. You're like, what is this, where am I? The fundamental necessities of operating,
Yeah.
And that really, for me, it tickles and stretches my brain in such a way that I just feel it's like, those old video game cartridges that you still have to blow the dust out of? That's what it feels like.
In Atari games.
Yeah. Real quick.
I've been doing that for the SD cards. I'm blowing out those lately.
Is it bringing you back?
It was. The old Mac computer that we have down at the front, the charger wasn't working, but yeah, it's okay, keep it going.
That breath, it's all about that breath.
Breath work, can you incorporate breath work?
Right, we'll talk about that too.
Okay, so we started this tangent that we're going down is that this exploration of spirituality and
right.
diving, so was it when you started when you moved to Norway that you were aware of this life bigger, or what was that started to?
I mean, again, I can now, in looking back on it, I can see where seeds were starting to be planted, where my awareness was starting to open up about even just being involved in the dramatic arts, like theater in high school, that awakening my senses to this therapeutic process of utilizing the emotions that are within me and utilizing it in a way to express myself creatively and relate to people and have this heart-to-heart connection, But yes, to answer your question on a more conscious, aware scale, I would say moving to Norway was the first time that I remember really being okay, there is magic in the world. I knew it.
I knew a magic exists.
Right.
Harry Potter is real.
Yeah, because as a child, at least for me, and I'm sure for most children, because they're so in touch with source, and especially when you grow up in a situation that's like super favorable or ideal, I feel like a lot of your time is spent kind of like imagining and creating that there's like this fantastical, magical aspect to life and to reality, and you're like, well, let's see, I'm pretty sure, I have a hunch, Yeah. And so it's so beautiful to then, later in life get to that point where you kind of finally officially scratch the surface and are like, wow, like the first totally conscious paradigm shift, or the most conscious paradigm shift up until that point in my life. And I would attribute that to traveling for the first time abroad,
Yeah.
And also I had my first experience with plant medicine when I was there as well.
Okay.
And it's funny, actually, because growing up, I was like, I'm never gonna, do anything. I mean, I smoked a lot of weed growing up because, I didn't like drink or do any of the other things that high school kids did. Like, I was actually really grateful that marijuana found me at a young age because it created sort of this like buffer to put me in like a comfort space,
Okay.
But other than that, my mother has mental illness. So I was always like, I don't want to, I had this fear of being like her. So I was like, I'm never going to do any kind of like mushrooms or anything crazy like that.
Interesting.
Yes.
I have my sister has severe mental illness, and I said anything that was harder than alcohol I would never do.
Right.
And I even said I would never do weed and never do, like, especially she had a binge on acid and then she went insane. And so it was always like this.
Right.
No, so,
Right.
and then I found plant medicine too.
Did we find it or did it find us? It's like undeniable. It comes knocking on your door. It's like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is really interesting because I feel like that buildup of fear is such a it's such a mix of like just that direct experience we have with those people in our lives that are suffering, but then also all of the social stigma that's like the craziness in our society is the result of this plant or this drug. Don't do, when in reality it's like, well, what is really to blame?
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's the society itself, and a lot of times the medications that they're prescribing people that have,
the medications, and then also like not looking at, we need to be treated as a holistic person, not a piecemeal. And,
right.
Oftentimes, like, I see it so much with people being like, even like take it down a little bit onto like a more common mental illness, like having depression or something.
Absolutely.
And then, like most of the time you can attribute, or at least it's my belief, that the majority of depression cases are just an imbalance of nutrition.
Right.
And that, when people allow themselves to actually say, oh, look at it, I'm deficient in these vitamins and minerals, and that's why my brain's not firing properly, or I'm not coping right, and suddenly that goes away.
Right.
But no, like, but that's like the last thing that, is looked at oftentimes anyways. It's an interesting society time, but I see that shifting, and I see more and more awareness brought to how do we look at everything as a whole. So you grew up with your mom having a mental illness and seeing what she was going through, which probably brought you into this questioning of something higher than yourself too, and what does this all mean?
Absolutely. I actually wanted to go to school for research psychology. I really felt very passionate about helping to develop non-pharmaceutical treatments for mental disorders, because I was like, this sucks. My mom, can't be off her medication, but when she's on it, she's miserable. And she's just like completely shut down, like a robot. And so I saw that like dissonance of like, this is supposed to be medicine, but it's not. It's making it worse in a sense,
Yeah.
So I started even before I went to school, I started doing research, and I very quickly learned that it's totally a Western society thing to look at someone and be like, your square peg doesn't fit into this round hole. Your brain's broken. Here's some drugs. Or let's put you in this padded cell, Whereas with a lot of indigenous cultures and societies that are older than ours, they see people that have different minds and different ways of existing and being and thinking. And they don't say those people are broken. They say that they're gifted. They're special.
Yeah.
And that difference in them is nurtured in such a way that those are the people that become the medicine women and men and the shamans and the prophets or psychics or whatever, because they're able to tap into things that most of us are not necessarily able to access.
Yeah.
So when I learned about that, I was like, it just really broadened things for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like not on like that on a mental illness, but I was spending some time. I had somebody visiting me recently, and I had two people visiting me, and one of the people had autism. And it was high functioning, but I could see that that getting caught up in the emotions and the The story just did not exist. But the matter of factness and the like, I'm just going to do this, this, and this, you know, kind of thing, like formed their own genius.
Exactly.
And, you know, it was like this other form of, you know, so, you know, they were extremely smart, but in this one vertical line that really got to develop due to how their brain functioned.
Right.
You know, and it was like, it was the things that, you know, the simple things that maybe would irritate or get the average person carried away or get caught up into things like that, that sense of bother, that sense of questioning, that sense of, you know, complacency didn't exist. It was just like, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. Okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And there's no other backstory that's added. And so there was no level of fear that prevented immobility. Right? You know, and it was like, wow, that's his greatest gift.
It's a superpower.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would say that a lot of the greatest artists and just greatest minds in history have had something different. You know, it's just a matter of, were they in the proper environment for that to be nurtured, where the brain could, you know, learn how to balance and utilize that difference, or were they like were they forced into a box that they didn't fit into, you know, and then as a result developed all of these other things.
Yeah.
So
you wanted to go to school for research psychology.
Right, yes.
Bringing it back in together.
Yes, thank you.
And you know, wanted to look at other forms. And it's interesting because maybe not research psychology, but finding other alternative forms of treating and helping and facilitating people is what you do.
Right. Well, so that's the thing. Before I even got to go to college, I took this trip to Norway, had my first plant medicine experience, and then I moved to LA and I started going to school and everything, you know. But already, again, that seed had been planted of like, yeah, there's other ways to like facilitate self-healing for people with you know, traumas or disorders. But still, I started going through school, and then after not too long, I got completely sucked into the direct experience of utilizing plant medicines for my own healing, you know, and I got to a certain point where I was just like, I feel like that thing that I was going to school to study, which probably I wouldn't have been able to get that far in anyway, just in terms of like what I would have wanted to. I mean, there's just so much like so many politics that go into, you know, actually being able to utilize plant medicines and different types of alternative therapies and healings and making it readily available for the public, you know. Yeah. There's the corporate interest and there's all this like bull, you know. So I'm so grateful that I was sucked out of that and put directly into like, okay, well, you have plenty of traumas just like everybody else. So here's this person and here's this stranger and here's this new friend, and you're just gonna with such ease and grace be guided to all these different experiences and see how powerful and just transformational and beautiful the healing experience can be without doing more damage. You know what I mean? And so, that is really what led me into, you know, then doing the healing sanctuaries and then meeting more medicine people and learning about more medicines. There's like so many different plants and medicines always coming to me, and I'm just like, wow, it doesn't end. This is what? This is from Africa? Amazing. Yeah. I feel like a little kid, you know, I'm constantly excited and just like.
Well, I mean, there's you know, in pharmacology classes that I used to take and stuff like that, there's over 2,400 plants that have different psychotropic qualities that are natural in nature. Whether the morning glories or the different things, but 2,400 and now you're not even talking about all of the plants that have DMT concentrations in it, you know, and then you're finding that that's, you know, so many, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's all over. I always tell people like, you know, like And it's being written about, I mean, I might get some criticism for this, but like in the book of the Genesis, it talks about, if you want to see what God sees when the snake comes and visits Eve, if you want to see what God sees, eat the fruit and the seed.
Interesting.
And then what did Eve do? She ate two components, and that's what you need to do in a lot of plant medicine.
Right.
And all of a sudden, their eyes, they could see a world in a different light, and they could see like God saw.
Interesting.
Yeah,
wow.
So, I mean, it's even written about then. And then interesting enough, so there's a little bit of controversy, but most people agree that the Bible was created in Egypt. But either way, the cicada plant has one of the highest concentrations of DMT out of any plant.
Oh, interesting.
And it was rampant in that area.
Huh. Makes a
Very
lot of sense.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have to say, honestly, one of my favorite things about ripening into adulthood and life is just seeing how much truth there is in everything. It's like even the things that, like growing up, I was honestly pretty anti-religion just because I was forced into like Christianity and stuff, and I was just sitting there like, something doesn't smell right, just like the forcefulness of the whole type of religion that I was in. But as I get older, I'm like, okay, I see the seeds of truth all throughout, and then I feel that what tends to happen is the mind, or the ego, takes those seeds of truth and distorts it, and it starts to create all these stories around it, and it becomes this like big thing. But there's still a seed of truth in there,
Yeah, and there's a seed of truth across all of the different ancient texts.
Right.
More and more ancient texts are being discovered. I have a friend that has a friend that's putting together the real 46 manuscripts that are in Tibet and scattered throughout China right now. It's kind of like the Celestine prophecy, but in real life.
Wow.
And they're finding these ancient texts and scrolls that they're putting together, right now, today, at this moment, literally right at this moment. I forget how many they've already discovered, in the tens of them already, but there's allegedly 46 of them. Huh. But but there's more and more of these sacred texts, and it's like when you take it and you get those seeds of wisdom, and you look at things, and I think where we've went wrong, again,
wrong.
Judge me if you will, whatever. These are just my belief systems. People might resonate with this, but since this is open to, we got lots of listeners and things like that. But where we've went wrong is we've taken a metaphor and made it a reality. And so oftentimes these stories or these scriptures, like, the Bhagavad Gita is all one big metaphor, and people can get that because it takes place in the middle of a war zone. But, then there's different elements that are taken as real. But what if it was just that moment of time? Or because if everything, in order for us to communicate, we need to communicate in a way of what people will understand in the now. And if we were communicating now today, we might communicate and use the metaphor of a computer or an information age, or the way that you can store things and put data into different files and stuff like that. But if you're using metaphors from years ago, you might, do different things. Like there's, passages in the Quran about dogs and to stay away from them, and but at that time there were street dogs and they were dirty, right? It doesn't mean like the dogs today are bad, and then different passages in the Bible that people like grab a hold of, and it's like, well, can we look at the lesson that was around that?
Right.
Right. And the lesson has this beautiful wisdom when you look at it as the lesson. What is that trying to convey, and what was that conveying at that point in time during that period of time? And how do people process, and how do people view the world, because those words are just mere language.
Right.
Like if a cell phone didn't exist, then they're not going to use the terminology of a cell phone or a phone for communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me, just what you're saying now, of something that I found myself referencing quite a lot, just the concept of like us and the mind that we have trying to make the infinite finite. Mm-hmm. You have these experiences of the divine, and I feel like for me, the moment that I start to try to think about it, and even more so if I try to put it into words, it's so minimized. Yeah. Because this is finite, and everything else is infinite. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
if I'm
no, it does.
Communicating what I'm trying to, again.
Trying to communicate.
Right. Yeah, language is very limiting in that way. And I feel like... and
then all the translations, too.
There's so many layers of like skewing, right, and misunderstanding, which is why it makes sense that you would be so much closer to the truth to absorb the vibrational understanding, or what resonates with the heart, as opposed to what this is trying to decipher and categorize and label and put in a box, right? Yeah. Because this is super limited.
Yeah. And so is that a lot of what you do in your facilitation?
Yes. Well, and let me ask you, in what sense do you mean?
Well, I mean, do you help people find how to listen to their heart and resonate with their heart and find their own truth, or their, like, what is it that you exactly facilitate for people, I guess? Yeah.
I'm a very firm believer in, and again, my truth, your truth, it's all perspective. But for me, I don't consider myself like a shaman or a healer. I'm my own shaman. I'm my own healer, but I can't heal anyone else directly. I can create a sacred, safe space and share tools that have helped me in my healing so that you can do your own healing, Yeah. And so in that way, the way that my ceremonies are constructed is a combination of all the little tools that I've gathered from like this plant medicine and this experience and this ceremony, just different things throughout my life. And one of the things that I really, so there's a couple things that I feel are really key to allowing this part of us to relax and allowing this part of us to open and speak more. And one of those things is the utilizing a blindfold.
Okay.
Yeah, so in my working with ayahuasca for my personal journey, I had some experiences where I was given a blindfold. And the idea is that when you're working with this powerful plant medicine, it's basically, she's taking you back to the seed trauma, or the seed of truth of what you experienced at some point in your life, right? As a child, most likely. And it's allowing you to bring those fragmented pieces of yourself back into alignment. Because essentially what happens is, we come into the world pure. And then we start to have experiences from our parents because they're traumatized from their childhood. And we have experiences from society because it's a collective group of traumatized individuals. And so all these things start to happen to us. We don't know why. We don't understand it. So the mind is like, we need to understand it. So let me create a story about it to make it make sense. Yeah. But we have to continue growing at the same time. So all these pieces of ourselves are fragmented along the way, and this brings us into adulthood where we have, maybe relationship issues or issues with money. And it's all built around these like seed incidents that we created stories around that we believed were facts. Yeah. Again, like you were saying, as opposed to understanding and taking in the feeling of the original thing, creating stories and taking everything as fact as opposed to metaphor. So working with something like ayahuasca allows you to go back to that seed and bring those fragmented pieces of yourself back into alignment. And utilizing the blindfold basically allows you to stay in the deeper layers of your subconscious and allows you to hold the most impeccable space for your inner child as these pieces come back into alignment. Because the thing is, when you're going so deep into yourself, something might be triggered or unlocked. There's been many instances in my journeys where this deep sadness comes up and I'm not expecting it, or maybe I'll see something, an old memory. And the impulse is knee-jerk. It's to open your eyes, like, no, keep yourself safe, you know? So if you have this blindfold in place, it really allows you to stay in there and just hold space for yourself. And so I so love that. It's completely changed my life working in that way. So I love to bring that into any kind of ceremony that I hold for other people.
Now, you do a lot of cacao ceremonies. Can you explain what those are for people?
Yeah. So, oh gosh. Well, let me start by saying that cacao is the plant that chocolate is made from. And a lot of indigenous cultures use it as a medicine. And really it's a heart medicine in every sense of the word. So physically speaking, it's very good for cardiovascular health. It also has something called theobromine in it, which gives you energy, but unlike caffeine, it's like a very balanced mind-heart energy. And energetically, it's a heart opener. So you just really feel, even if you're doing it out, I drink it every single day.
Okay.
And I find that it just really puts me into my heart space. Like I just feel much more balanced and much more at ease and just less trapped up here.
Okay.
So for the ceremonies, I make cacao for everyone into a latte. Use a little bit of nut milk, hot water, honey. It's cacao from Ecuador, what I personally like to work with. I tried many different types, but the one that I sort of settled on felt the most impactful and pure. So yeah, basically.
Now, is this different than when people go to the store and they see cacao?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so a lot of the, pretty much all the chocolate that is readily available in stores is, it's just mostly milk and sugar. And even if you find, 100% pure dark chocolate in the store, it doesn't oftentimes have the cacao butter in it. It has been processed so much that it doesn't have all of the, it's just not a whole plant.
Gotcha.
You're not getting all of the components of it really that allow your body to absorb all the properties. Yeah.
Now, I have seen, and maybe some people else have seen, cacao powders that are popping up in the store.
Right.
Are those a little bit better?
Any cacao is great, but in terms of the effectiveness, you definitely want something more like a crumble that has the cacao butter in it. The powders usually don't have the butter in it.
Okay.
And so your body's just not going to be able to absorb it as well because it needs a little bit of that fat,
Okay. So you get yours from Ecuador.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically you come in, I always love to start my ceremonies with just honestly sharing with everyone where I am in my life, like that day or that week. I used to really rigorously plan out what I would say and do in the ceremony, but just like with everything else, I found that the more that I let go of this, trying to control it, and I just flowed from here, the more seamless and beautiful and just divine it felt. So I really just show up. I show up as authentically as I can, and whatever I share about where I'm at in my life is offered up as a theme or just sort of a through line for everyone in the group, and more times than not, it resonates with people because we're all so on the same journey, just different routes,
That's why the same few storylines of a movie just get remade and remade.
Right. Hey, that resonates. Yeah, exactly. I share a bit about myself. Then we pass out the cacao. I love to have everyone put basically when the cacao comes to you in the glass, just put it to your heart, take a deep breath, and send some love into it before you pass it on to your neighbor. We're all sort of sitting in a circle, So then we get sort of this collective vortex of love going into each cup. And then I love to have people go around and share their names and their intention because, personal intention is everything. Especially when you're working with plant medicine, you're literally programming what you would like this to do for you, It's incredible. Then I love to take people through a meditation just to get them grounded, call in some of the ancestral lineages, because so much of what we carry with us in our day-to-day life is not even directly our stuff, you know? It's like our great-grandmothers or even our sisters, because we're so emotionally connected, you know?
Yeah.
So just bringing in those people and for support and just really opening your heart to all of the different relationships and connections that you have in your life, because regardless of how this categorizes it as like a difficult relationship or a great one, it's there for a purpose, you know, and we're growing so immensely from every single one. So after that, I have everyone lay down, put on their blindfolds, and the other major component of my ceremonies, in addition to the blindfold, is the music that I play.
And you're also a DJ too.
Right. so
she always has a good playlist.
Thank you. Yeah, the music and sound. Oh gosh, it's been such a medicine for me my entire life, and it's so funny. I was just having this conversation with someone today, actually, about how I always have like little earbuds in, because it just helps to kind of like drown out the thoughts a little bit, you know, just to put me into this heart space again. And it's funny, actually. It's reminding me of something else. Just this little fact of the day. Memories that have an emotional impact on us are stored in a different part of the brain than other memories. So it's more long term, you know, it's like a survival mechanism. Like, this made me afraid, I'm going to remember this forever. I loved this, I'll remember this forever. And so I remember watching a documentary about elderly people that have like Alzheimer's and stuff. And people were bringing their iPods into these homes because, you know, even if they're not super lucid and present in their day-to-day life, you can put music on from their upbringing, their childhood, and it brings them back to the present, because all of a sudden they're having this emotional connection with something that's tied to a memory that brings them back to who they are.
Wow.
Right? It's incredible. So I feel like that's why it's such a... I just got chills. Why it's such a beautiful component for me to be able to utilize in my own healing, and also in the space I create for others, because again, the goal is to just kind of like soothe this part of ourselves and allow this part to open and to experience what it feels like to live in here more.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you help people open that heart center, they create that intention in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you know, what do you think the most, when do you think people need to, or are, need is a interesting word, but when do you think people benefit most from coming to like a cacao ceremony?
Well, you know, I feel like people benefit most from coming to a cacao ceremony when they show up, when they feel called to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, if people are sitting there and they're like not sure whether it's for them or not, because they just don't have much awareness yet, you know, of that, you know, is it like, you know, when someone's going through, you know, like a breakup or this or that, or like any time, like is there certain periods of time when you find, or that when you yourself at different junctures feel most drawn to?
Yeah, absolutely. And my first thought was, of course, to answer the question in that way, because, you know, it makes so much sense. It's heart medicine, you know, and especially with the breath work that we incorporate and just the sense of community and all of that, it's extremely helpful for people that are dealing with any sort of just emotional congestion, if they're feeling blocked in their life in some way, you know, if they're very like just stuck in their mind, they're not really sure what the next step is or how they can bring in something into their life, you know, in terms of like relationships or finances or creativity, because essentially what this experience is so great for is, again, connecting ourselves to our truest essence, You know, our heart. I really feel that the heart is this this primary brain, really. You know, and this direct connection to our soul. And I feel that it's my higher self and my soul and my inner child. You know, it's all the same for me. That is the being that is creating this divine plan for me, and this divine orchestration where I can, you know, get years down the road in my life and look back and be like, damn, that was perfect. It seemed a little bit like difficult at times, and I didn't understand it fully when I was in it. But now that I can look back, it's like, wow. Yeah. You know? And so I feel like that this kind of ceremony, and ceremony in general, to be honest, but especially working with cacao, it's so beautiful and helpful in reestablishing that connection to yourself, and just really getting in touch with how you can be the most of service to yourself.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. And you know, I know that we're coming to an end of today's podcast. I feel like we could talk about a couple more episodes and things like that. But where can people find you?
Well, here.
Here, you know,
sure.
every other Sunday. But, you know, like otherwise, like, is there any, like, your Instagram or anything else that they can find you on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a lot of my promotion on Instagram. I love to write as well. So I do a lot of blogging just about my personal healing journey, and that all goes into my Instagram. Facebook a little bit as well. I'm in the process of developing a website right now, putting my businesswoman hat on, getting all official. But yeah, other than that, I work also at a lot of different festivals, big festivals in California, doing healing work, and yeah.
All right, well, we'll put your Instagram handle in there. What is it?
Awesome. Celeste McMillian.
Okay, so we'll put it in there for everybody, and if you had to leave the viewers with one thing, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. With one thing, wow.
Well, whatever that thing comes up. I mean, we can have you back and you can leave them with another thing at a different time, but for right now. Yeah. What's coming through for me now is that if I had to pick one tool of the bazillions that are readily available to us, the one tool that's been the most helpful for me in my life is just listening. Yeah. It's just doesn't require anything outside of yourself. It's just, you know, the more you can listen, the more ease and joy and just more of everything, you know? Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
And thank you, everybody, for joining. Until next time.
If you enjoyed this conversation, like it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you want some more amazing resources on your path of liberation, head over to liberateyourself.com and sign up for our mailing list. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram at Liberate Hollywood, all one word, or Liberate Emporium, all one word. Until next time, liberate yourself.